Welcome, fellow Toastmasters and honored guest. I'm happy to say that the other honored guests left, so I don't make as much of a fool of myself as I did yesterday in front of people I don't know. But today, like Thomas said, I'm going to be speaking a little bit about reading and what really has inspired my love for reading coming from childhood up until this point, and why I think reading is important. The project kind of stipulated to choose from one literary work, and I had a really hard time doing that because I love to read so much. I couldn't choose just one to read for 15 minutes. I couldn't do it. So I decided that I am going to take you not only through time and space, but take you to different worlds, different lands through these different books. I'm going to be reading excerpts from 3 selections. One of them is Stephen King's Bag of Bones, Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, and J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. My goal is to show you that by reading, you can go to very different times and places within a very short amount of time, within days, if not minutes. With that, I'd like to begin with Stephen King's Bag of Bones, and here we're going to be reading about a man who is in a very dark place in his life at this point in time. On a very hot day in August of 1994, my wife told me she was going down to the dairy Rite Aid to pick up a refill on her sinus medicine prescription. This is stuff you can buy over the counter these days, I believe. I had finished my writing for the day and offered to pick it up for her. She said thanks, but she wanted to get a piece of fish at the supermarket next door anyways. 2 birds with 1 stone and all that. She blew a kiss at me off the palm of her hand and went out. The next time I saw her, she was on TV. That's how you identify the dead here in Derry. No walking down a subterranean corridor with green tiles in the walls and long fluorescent bars overhead. No naked body rolling out of a chilly drawer on casters. You just go into an office, marked private, and look at a TV screen and say, yep, or nope. The Rite Aid and the shop wall are less than a mile from our house in a little neighborhood strip mall, which also supports a video store, a used bookstore named Spread It Around. They do a very brisk business in my old paperbacks. A Radio Shack, and a fast photo. It's on Up Mile Hill at the intersection of Witcham and Jackson. She parked in front of Blockbuster Video, went into the drugstore, and did business with Mr. Joe Weiser, who was the druggist in those days. He has since moved on to the Rite Aid in Bangor. At the checkout, she picked up one of those little chocolates with marshmallow inside, this one in the shape of a mouse. I found it later in her purse. I unwrapped it and ate it myself, sitting at the kitchen table, with the contents of her red handbag spread out in front of me. And it was like taking communion. When it was gone, except for the taste of chocolate on my tongue and in my throat, I burst into tears. I sat there in the litter of her Kleenex and makeup and keys and half-finished rolls of certs and cried, with my hands over my eyes, the way a kid cries. The sinus inhaler was in a Rite Aid bag. It had cost $12.18. There was something else in the bag too, an item, which had cost $22.50. I looked at this other item for a long time, seeing it, but not understanding it. I was surprised, maybe even stunned, but the idea that Joanna Arlen Noonan might have been leading another life, one I knew nothing about, never crossed my mind, not then. Next, I'm going to take you back in time into Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. And I'm going to be doing a southern accent, so forgive me. We're going House of Cards style here. The Radley place fascinated Dill. In spite of our warnings and explanations, it drew him as the moon draws water, but drew him no nearer than the light pole on the corner, a safe distance from the Radley gate. There he would stand, his arm around the fat pole, staring and wondering. The Radley place jutted into a sharp curve beyond our house. Walking south, one faced its porch. The sidewalk turned and ran beside the loft. The house was low, once white with a deep front porch and green shutters, but had long ago darkened the color of the slate gray yard around it. Rain-rotted shingles drooped over the eaves of the veranda. Oak trees kept the sun away. The remains of a picket drunkenly guarded the front door. A swept yard that was never swept, where Johnson grass and rabbit tobacco grew in abundance. Inside the house lived a malevolent phantom. People said he existed, but Jim and I had never seen him. People said he went out at night when the moon was down and peeped in windows. When people's azaleas froze in a cold snap, it was because he had breathed on them. Any stealthy small crimes committed in Maycomb were his work. Once the town was terrorized by a series of morbid nocturnal events, people's chickens and household pets were found mutilated. Although the culprit was Crazy Addie, who eventually drowned himself in Boggles Eddy, people still looked at the Radley place, unwilling to discard their initial suspicions. A Negro would not pass the Radley place at night. He would cut across to the sidewalk opposite and whistle as he walked. The Maycomb school grounds adjoined the back of the Radley lot. From the Radley chicken yard, tall pecan trees shook their fruit into the schoolyard. But the nuts lay untouched by the children. Radley pecans would kill you. A baseball hit into the Radley yard was a lost ball and no questions asked. The misery of that house began many years before Jim and I were born. The Radleys, welcome anywhere in town, kept to themselves, a predilection unforgivable in Maycomb. But worshipped, they did not go to church, Maycomb's principal recreation, but worshipped at home. Mrs. Radley, it seldom if ever, crossed the street for a mid-morning coffee break with her neighbors, and certainly never joined a missionary circle. Mr. Radley, promptly at 12, sometimes carrying a brown paper bag that the neighborhood assumed contained the family groceries. I never knew how old Mr. Radley made his living. Jim said he bought cotton, a polite term for doing nothing. But Mr. Radley and his wife had lived there with their 2 sons as long as anybody could remember. The shutters and doors of the Radley house were closed on Sundays, another thing alien to Maycomb's ways. Closed doors meant illness and cold weather only. Of all days, Sunday was the day for formal afternoon visiting. Ladies wore corsets, men wore coats, children wore shoes. But to climb the Radley front steps and call, "Hey!" of a Sunday afternoon was something their neighbors never did. The Radley house had no screen doors. I once asked Atticus if it ever had any. Atticus said yes, but before I was born. Finally, we're going to go to a magical land, one of my favorites, Harry Potter, and we will be finding out about the first time that they saw Hogwarts, which was, for me, a very, very, I don't want to be cheesy, but special time in my life. The train slowed right down and finally stopped. People pushed their way toward the door and out onto a tiny, dark platform. Harry shivered in the cold night air. Then a lamp came bobbing over the heads of the students, and Harry heard a familiar voice. First years over here? All right there, Harry." Hagrid's big hairy face beamed over the sea of heads. "Come on, follow me. Any more first years? Mind your step now. First years, follow me." Slipping and stumbling, they followed Hagrid down what seemed to be a steep, narrow path. It was so dark on either side of them that Harry thought there must be thick trees there. Nobody spoke much. Neville, the boy who kept losing his toad, sniffed once or twice. "You'll get your first sight of Hogwarts in a sec," Hagrid called over his shoulder. "Just round this bend here." There was a loud "ooh." The narrow path had opened suddenly onto the edge of a great black lake, perched atop a high mountain on the other side, its windows sparkling in the starry sky. It was a vast castle with many turrets and towers. "No more than 4 to a boat," called Hagrid, pointing to a fleet of little boats sitting in the water by the shore. Harry and Ron were followed into their boat by Neville and Hermione. "Everyone in?" shouted Hagrid, who had a boat to himself. "Right then, forward!" And the fleet of little boats moved off all at once, gliding across the lake, which was as smooth as glass. Everyone was silent, staring up at the great castle overhead. It then towered over them as they sailed nearer and nearer to the cliff on which it stood. "Heads down!" yelled Hagrid as the first boat reached the cliff. They all bent their heads, and the little boats carried them through a curtain of ivy that hid a wide opening in the cliff face. They were carried along a dark tunnel, which seemed to be taking them right underneath the castle, until they reached a kind of underground harbor, where they clambered out onto rocks and pebbles. "Oi, you there! Is this your toad?" said Hagrid, who was checking the boats as people climbed out of them. "Trevor!" cried Neville blissfully, holding out his hands. Then they clambered up a passageway in the rock after Hagrid's lamp, coming out at last onto smooth, damp grass right in the shadow of the castle. They walked up a flight of stone steps and crowded around the huge oak front door. "Everyone here? You there? Still got your toad?" Hagrid raised a gigantic fist and knocked 3 times on the castle door. As you can see, all of these books have very different characters, themes, settings. But one thing they all do is they take you somewhere that you would never think you could be. I have developed my love of reading by reading so many different books, but I really feel like there is a book for almost everybody out there, whether you like to read or not. There is probably something that will hook your interest. It just takes a little bit of research and a little bit of open-mindedness. With that, I would like to turn it back over to our Toastmaster, Thomas Bunn.